Chapter 521, Old Driver, Bring Me With You. You mean leaping into the air can help us dodge the eruption of the chilly energy in our bodies? But the chilly energy is stored in the body. What does leap up have to do with its eruption? Sire and other warriors of the ultimate West realm found it hard to believe. The Zombie King uses the gloomy and moist energy in the ground to spread the chilly energy. That is easy to understand. If the curse of chilly energy in the body also has to be activated by the energy in the ground. After passing the king difficulty level, Nalan Mingsu had obtained many experience points and finished the mission for advancing to her subclass. While finished the mission in satisfaction, she explained, "Don't you see the connection now? Then, why does it activate the eruption at a regular interval?" A warrior of the ultimate West realm asked in disbelief. If the Zombie King activates it randomly, no one can predict it, right? It's because you don't know auras, Nalan Mingsu said. In Diablo 2, the auras are all activated automatically if it's not purposefully controlled. As an undead creature, their Zombie King doesn't have a high level of intelligence, which is why it can't control this effect. It was an automatic activation mechanism similar to an aura. As long as the players discovered its activation rhythm, they could dodge it perfectly. Nalan Mingsu glanced at Mr. Fang and asked, "I wonder how much of that I got right." Mr. Fang applauded and said, 100%, 100%. They complimented each other happily. "When you have time, will you tell us more about King's avatar?" Nalan Mingsu asked. Now that Mr. Fang had used vanishing steps, who knew if he would talk about other even more advanced skills in the future? Skills weren't combat techniques which must be used with warrior chi or spiritual spells that must be cast with spiritual essence. They were combat skills that needed little energy and required simple criteria, but they could unleash great power. Vanishing Step was a skill of controlling one's steps to make sure that they remained outside the opponent's vision, which could prevent the opponent from counter-attacking. However, achieving the effect of Vanishing Step in the virtual reality game was more difficult than finding the right positions. One must also consider the angles of the sword strikes, the steps on positioning, and the force used in each attack. Fang Chi's opponent was a monster that was as powerful as a real Zombie King, not a lame monster in the original game before he traveled through space and time. In the original version, the Zombie King's speed had been slowed down in consideration of the slower reflexes of ordinary people. For ordinary people, the Zombie King in the current version of the game was a monster that moved as swift as the wind. However, a level 20 Slayer had far surpassed the abilities of an ordinary person as well. While battling, Fang Chi must leap up to dodge the activation of the chilly energy in his body. To achieve this, Fang Chi had to rely on things such as the skills from the sliding steps of Drive Slash, Immortal Wind Cloud Body, and Drunk Immortal Moon Observing Step, the Blade Master's profound understanding of sword techniques, and the powerful Great Sword technique from Cloud. On top of all that, he was more familiar with this game compared to others, and he was barely able to use concepts such as Vanishing Step to attack the Zombie King and use combos. The result was amazing. Many people looked at Mr. Fang in a daze, wishing that they could also use these fancy and effective skills that they didn't know. As for that, Mr. Fang scratched his head at the request of telling them the later plot of the King's avatar. "I'll consider it when I have time." Hearing Nalan Mingsu's analysis, Saya fell silent. Is it really what she said? Saya blinked. Can we avoid the Zombie King's freezing energy so easily? Of course. To master these skills later on, she had died countless times in the Shadow Thunderland and spent many crystals to buy life tokens. But it was another story, sir. Sudanji walked over. Can you take me through the dungeon, so I can advance to a subclass? She played a female mage. It would be much easier if she chose to play as a female slayer or a female fighter. After all the players had learned sword techniques and fist techniques in the real world. However, mages were different. Even though the cultivators and mages both used lightning and fire, and the effects looked almost the same. However, spiritual spells and magic spells had different incantations, hand gestures, and ways of circulating spiritual essence and MP. The mages needed some time to adapt to the new system. It was why Xuanhuan had become an idle player and a newbie from the captain of the team which had won the second place in the Counter-Strike competition. She had died several times on expert difficulty, let alone the master difficulty level. It wasn't only Xuanhuan. Many other cultivators who played as mages had the same problem, and they were eager for a free ride. "Sir, take me too, old driver. Take me with you." Me too." Tang Yu dashed over as well. As a cultivator who had played with guns only in StarCraft, his performance as a male gunner was very poor. "Can you take me too?" Gachina was in an embarrassing situation as well. He had chosen the class of priest which looked similar to cultivators. However, after he entered the game, he found that his weapon was a big cross. Except for some spells, he had to fight at close range. Caught between close range and long range, he felt like this class was more difficult to play than mages. "Alright." The moment he said it, Mr. Fang glanced at his fatigue points and shrugged. "I ran out of fatigue points." Fatigue points? The players looked at Mr. Fang in puzzlement. The fatigue points determined if the players could enter a dungeon. Although the new version didn't have the settings for rooms, it retained the setting of fatigue points which was consumed according to the exploration range in the dungeons. If the players used all the fatigue points, they couldn't enter dungeons again on the same day. Having leveled to over level 20, Mr. Fang had run out of his fatigue points. By now, Fang Chi had only played a little more than 3 hours. In other words, the players only needed about 3 to 4 hours to level up and hunt for treasures in the dungeons each day, and they could use the remaining time to do other missions. If they were fast, 3 hours was enough. Of course, if the players tried to pass the king difficulty level without the necessary levels and equipment, 8 hours each day wouldn't be enough for them. Hearing his explanation, all the players were alarmed. "What? The game has such a setting?" Liu Piling said. "I spent a long time exploring the dungeon of king difficulty level and didn't pass it. It's just a waste of time and energy." Then he felt frustrated. He had thought that he could continue his exploration after being tricked by his teammates, but now he learned that there was a limit on it. "Ah!" He howled silently. "What should we do now?" Xuanhuan found that she still had many fatigue points left. "How come Mr. Fang is already out of it?" Mr. Fang pointed at Jiang Xiaoyu and said, "You can ask Xiaoyu if she has fatigue points left. Xiaoyu can take us too." Sitting next to Mr. Fang, the Lali was concentrating on her female mage character. This mage was actually in close range combat. "Xiaoyu, take me with you." "Xiaoyu, I'm your good friend. Can you take me first? I have gold coins. The market price is 10,000 gold coins." "Take me." They all came up to her. Jiang Xiaoyu asked, "What's happening?" Chapter 522, How come people of this subclass are blind? After watching Mr. Fang pass the Shadow Thunderland at King difficulty level, many players had picked up a few things that they could use to try to pass the dungeons at a high difficulty level, and they were eager to try. Due to the limited fatigue points, the players acted more cautious now and wouldn't dare to challenge the dungeons that were too difficult for their levels. The system version of Dungeon Fighter Online had 5 primary classes and 40 subclasses at this moment. Each primary class had 4 subclasses, and males and females had different systems. For example, the male slayer's demon-like hands turned red because of the Kazan syndrome, but for the female slayers, their demon-like hand turned red because of the metastasis. They were fundamentally different. After advancing to their subclasses, the differences between males and females were even greater. Male slayers could advance to blade masters, berserkers, asuras, and soul benders. Female slayers, on the other hand, could advance to sword masters, demon slayers, vagabonds, and dark templars, both excelling in sword techniques. Blade masters and sword masters wielded different basic sword techniques. Blade masters used the secret sword art while sword master used imperial swordsmanship. Imperial swordsmanship was a set of ultimate sword techniques inherited from an unknown source in the ancient times. It was said that they were created by a sword god who combined many kinds of sword techniques and combat techniques. This set of sword techniques was focused on fast sword strikes and contained horrid, destructive power. From the initiation method, it was similar to Virgil's dimension slash when he pulled out his saber. After the advancement to their subclasses, the players of the same primary class would follow completely different paths. Senior sister, what subclass do you plan to choose? On the side, Muking and Bai whispered to each other. I'll choose Sword Master. On the other side, Yuan Yang Castellan Zhongwu looked at Nalan Hongwu who sat next to him and asked, Brother Nalan, what subclass will you choose? Ha ha ha. Of course, Blade Master. Nalan Hongwu looked at his young game character in the computer and asked, how about you, brother? My martial Dao comes from the Heavenly Academy, and my style is a bit different from that of the Blade Master. Zhongwu shook his head and said, I've studied each subclass and found that my style is closer to the subclass of Azura. I'd try that. Come on, let's team up and enter the Shadow Thunderland at Master difficulty level. Count me in. Count me in. Sutanji immediately joined them. Me too. And Huai dashed over to take the ride. As mages, they hadn't gotten used to the new system yet, and it was painful to team up with strangers. As for Jiang Xiaoyu, when Mr. Fang used up his fatigue points, Jiang Xiaoyu was on her last trip in the dungeon. Running out of fatigue points didn't mean that the players could do nothing in the game. As mentioned before, in the huge city of Hendon Maya, there were all kinds of people doing all kinds of things, and they provided players with many types of missions that didn't require them to enter the dungeons. They could obtain all kinds of rewards such as reputation, gold coins, and even items when they finished these missions. Of course, if the players were not interested in these missions, they could go to Pungjin's dojo to battle with adventurers from all over the world. If someone wasn't interested in all that, they could do what Mr. Fang was doing. Right now, Mr. Fang exerted to the character selection interface, creating more characters in the Adventure Guild. He created another male Slayer with the ID Red Duke, a third Slayer with the ID Black Noble, and a fourth Slayer with the ID Sewer. Then, he created 2 accounts, one fighter and one gunner, and entered the game. Most of the games in the shop didn't allow players to create small accounts. However, in Dungeon Fighter Online, one could create as many characters as allowed in an Adventure Guild. TL note, in China, all accounts aside from a player's main account in online games were referred to as small accounts. Of course, having enough time to play all these classes was another story. While Mr. Fang played on his small accounts, Nalan Hongwu and other players of Darjin of the Deserted Sea Realm had also advanced to their subclasses one after another. For example, Nalan Hongwu had advanced to be a proud Blade Master. Zhongwu realized his dream of becoming an Azura, and Huai advanced to the Glacial Master subclass under the Male Mage class. In terms of other subclasses, except for Swift Master, he couldn't understand Blood Mage and Dimension Walker. They glanced at Sutanji's screen and asked, what's this? Sutanji said, I'm not sure. It seems to be some technology in the magic world. It sounds powerful. The world in Dungeon Fighter Online was a place with a perfect combination of magic and technology. In this world, there was a complete magic technology system which was completely different from the regular technology system. It was a combination of magic and technology. The products that this system developed looked like the new communication jade that the cultivators of the UI Taoist Alliance had made with spiritual spells and arrays, different from a smartphone but had the various functions of a smartphone. The background of this world was different from the worlds described in other games. Due to some reason related to the origin of Pandemonium, Pandemonium controlled powerful technology, and witches were the mages who studied this subject. Although she didn't quite understand this subclass, she chose this special path since she didn't like fighting. Should we venture into the dungeon again? I want to try my new skills. Good. I want to try my skills too. At this moment, they saw a guy walking over to the cross where they stood, stumbling around with a long saber which looked like a bamboo stick as he poked it around to the left and right. Ouch! With a scream, Xuanhuan fell flat on the ground in the street of Hendon Maya, attracting the attention of many players and pedestrians. I say, old ghost Zong, what's going on with you? Nalan Hongwu asked as his face twitched. Xuanhuan lifted his head, and everyone saw that he had a black band on his eyes. How come people of this subclass are blind? Xuanhuan howled. That goddamn trainer asked me if I was truly determined to advance to this subclass. I didn't know that he meant this. Before I could react, he turned me blind. He told me to see with my ears and slash with my heart. But how can I slash without seeing the enemies? With a dark face, he got up and said, let's go and level up. The others fell silent. They suddenly didn't want to team up with him. Chapter 523, The Place Where the Dreams Begin. Where are we going? Xuanhuan asked. Old Ghost Zong, can you enter the dungeon like this? Nalan Hongwu's face darkened, wondering how the latter could kill monsters without his sight. To tell you the truth, Xuanhuan said, although I lost my sight, I learned a technique named hostility detection from the trainer. With the experience that I've accumulated in the many years of studying martial Dao, I can detect enemies by hearing. The monsters pose no issue to me. Are you sure? Nalan Hongwu looked at him doubtfully. How do you think I walked here from the back alley all by myself? Xuanhuan said in anger. It's fine. Sutanji said, we don't have to go to the Shadow Thunderland which has a high difficulty level. We can try another dungeon which is less difficult. Right. And Hua said, anyway, we've finished almost all the missions in Hendon Maya. We can go and check out West Coast. The dungeons in the Sky Tower at West Coast were generally more difficult than Grand Flores, but since it was their first time entering, they could only choose the normal difficulty level, which wouldn't be too hard for them. Let's do it then. Nalan Hongwu agreed after a moment of consideration. He had heard of the legends about the Sky Tower and wanted to see it. Although they were much older than the players of the younger generation, they were newbies in this world. Everything was new and novel to them, let alone the Sky Tower in the legends. According to the legends, the Sky Tower was the only path leading to Empyrean. West Coast was a port city not far from Hendon Maya, and it was in the territory of Belmaya Principality. It had advanced on land and sea routes, and it was a busy city of commerce and trade. Also, it was an important location since it had the Sky Tower, the entrance to Empyrean. It was the second largest city in Arad, only smaller than Hendon Maya. In the original game, West Coast was next to Hendon Maya on the right. However, if the players wanted to go to West Coast from this huge city, they had three traveling options: horse carriages, zeppelin, and teleportation. Since the travel time between the two cities wasn't as short as that in the original game, the newbies couldn't afford teleportation. The missions that required traveling between the two cities had been adjusted accordingly. As mentioned before, the Arad continent had a prosperous magic civilization. Hendon Maya and West Coast were two prominent cities born in this civilization. According to the legends, Hendon Maya had been created in the desert by the powerful magic arrays of a great mage named Maya. That was why high-end magic products such as magic zeppelins and teleportation arrays weren't novel to the residents in these cities. Not only Nalan Hongwu and his teammates, but many players who finished advancing to their subclasses boarded a zeppelin and flew toward the next city. Flying on the magic zeppelin, they looked down and saw that the blue sea was almost the same color as the sky. The clear surface of the ocean sparkled with the reflections of white clouds in the sky. Big and small ships and boats passed or docked in the harbor. Looking down from the high sky, they saw a huge garden-style park in the center of the city. The orderly residential houses with white walls and red tiles spread out like fans. Outside the residential area was green forests that had dense plants, surrounding the garden-like city. In the distance, clouds floated around the rolling hills. and everything looked beautiful. While Maya was a bustling and prosperous city, West Coast was a charming port city which was both lively and tranquil. Maya was the starting point for the adventurers on this land. West Coast was the true starting place for their subclasses. Wow! This city is so pretty. Sitting on the Zeppelin, Mew King and Bai looked down at the city beneath them, finding that the style of the city was different from that of a cultivator-populated city. It was quite refreshing. Some warriors of the Ultimate West realm had also come to the sky above the city in the Zeppelin. With its balmy and fresh air, the beautiful port city surrounded by hills on three sides looked like a dazzling pearl inlaid in a green forest. This city will make few people want to leave. Luo Piling sighed. The cities in the Ultimate West realm were all built on the peaks on cliffs covered by ice and snow. Although they used arrays to adjust the temperatures in the cities, they could only see white snow swept by howling gales, representing death and destruction. It was said that many cities in the Ultimate West realm were built by their ancestors with blood and bones while they gradually drove away powerful fierce beasts in the severe cold. I'll be frank with you, since we're from the same place. I wonder why the cultivators of the spiritual state and even the deserted sea realm are so fortunate and have so many powerful figures. Saya sounded jealous as she said, they are living in such comfortable places and have such powerful combat techniques and sword techniques. On top of that, they are even better at playing games than us. For example, I don't know how they thought of such a battle skill as the vanishing steps. Luo Piling's face twitched. Didn't you say that it was an insignificant, low-level combat technique? Ha 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 ha. He laughed with sudden understanding. I didn't know that Miss Saya would be so stubborn. I'm not stubborn. Saya mumbled, I just wonder why they are so powerful. Luo Piling pretended to sniff the air. I smell some sourness and jealousy in the air. You, okay, I won't tease you. Carrying his heavy sword in his arms, Luo Piling said with a smile and a shake of his head. We still have some time before we can get off the Zeppelin. We must use the time on the Zeppelin to enjoy the beautiful scenery of this city. He sighed and said with some envy, it would be wonderful if we and our descendants can one day live in such a beautiful city. You seem to like this place? Saya asked tentatively. Yeah? Look at the houses and people. They seem to share our traditions and style. And I won't feel like a stranger living in such a city. He shook his head, and his smile under his blonde curls looked bright and warm. We never saw oceans living in the snow mountains in the Ultimate West realm. But here, we can gaze at the magnificent ocean all day long. It sounds wonderful. Saya frowned when a thought struck her. Then, she asked teasingly, do you like this place that much? What if some people want to destroy this place one day? Luo Piling tightened his grip on his sword and said with a faint smile, if that day comes, I'll kill anyone who dares to do that, even at the price of my life. Then, he shook his head and chuckled. But it's only a virtual world. How can anyone destroy it? You think too much. With that said, he continued to quietly enjoy the lovely scenery beneath the Zeppelin. Chapter 524, Leveling Up in Clumsiness. At this moment, Nalan Hongwu, Su Danji, and the others finally entered the legendary Sky Tower, the miraculous portal leading from Arad to Empyrean. Looking at the column-shaped tower leading to the sky, all the cultivators and warriors exclaimed and were amazed by this magical building. It hadn't originally existed at West Coast. It had only existed in legends, and few people had seen it. However, some time before the adventurers arrived at West Coast, it had suddenly appeared here. There were many strange life forms, such as cold and strange statues and enormous stone giants that could fly. In the pitch-black darkness, there were even many night stone statues that would come back to life at any time and attack anyone who entered the tower. This grand building was fraught with many weird things. The Sky Tower was also a dungeon. Soon, Nalan Hongwu, the leader of the team, chose to enter Dragonoid Nest. Since the magic power in the Sky Tower had effects on all life forms, the dragons had evolved into dragonoids. The dragonoids lived for the sole purpose of guarding their territory and blocking any adventurers. This was the first stop in the Sky Tower. This tower was magnificent. If the players walked inside, they would find that the interior space was even bigger than what it looked like from the outside. They walked up along the steps. Suddenly, a big flock of creatures flew toward them. "Watch my ice orb." After condensing magic energy in his palm, Xuanhuan launched the ice spell, shooting out a basketball-sized magic orb of ice and water. When the ice orb crashed into the herd of monsters, it instantly exploded into ice pellets and water splashes, sending these monsters flying in all directions. At a closer look, they saw that the monsters were baby dragons which looked quite similar to the horned dragons of the ultimate West realm. Including their wings, they were as big as basins. How was it? My ice orb wasn't bad, eh? Xuanhuan laughed at this effect. His mage character had good skills amongst all mages since he had played as a sorcerer in Diablo 2. Before his laughter naturally came to an end, a dark yellow shadow lunged at him from behind swiftly with whistling noises. Ground Quaker, Wave Sword. With quick reflexes, Xuanhuan detected the attacker's position with his ears and swung his short sword, shooting out a dark yellow sword light along the wall of the staircase. The force sent the attacking figure flying. Xuanhuan looked back and said in surprise, "Good aim." Ha ha ha. Zhu was feeling smug. "I'm still adapting, but my sense for hostility is more useful than eyes in some aspect. For example, I sensed many monsters lurking on the floor above us, ready to sneak attack." "You're so powerful?" Sudanji said in surprise. "Of course, I've never felt so sensitive to the movements around me. If I can master this skill, I think no one can sneak attack me." Xuanhuan laughed and said, "Although I'm blind, I feel like I'm stronger. That is possible?" Xuanhuan looked at Xuanhuan in a daze. "Of course," Xuanhuan said confidently. "Let's go. After we defeat this boss, we'll go and challenge a higher difficulty level." Xuanhuan's face turned grim. "Be careful. The murderous intent is getting close." Xuanhuan looked back and saw the dragonoid, who was sent flying, lunging toward them again. Xuanhuan held his sword before him horizontally. Tink. He blocked the attack steadily. It was a beautiful parry. Ha 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 ha. He was about to boast when a pitch-black sword light hacked toward him like a lightning flash. Ghost orb. Xuanhuan looked at the ghost orb crashing toward him in a daze. Exclamation mark. Ha 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 ha. Xuanhuan laughed and said, "What do you think of this ghost orb of mine? Did I just save you guys again? Old Ghost Nalan, what do you think?" "Old Ghost Nalan? Where's Old Ghost Nalan?" The other two teammates looked at him dumbfoundedly. Xuanhuan had only one thought in his mind right now: never team up with people who are blind. It was impossible to carry them. Meanwhile, Song Qingfeng and the others were also leveling up in the dungeons. At the Puppet Museum, Lin Xiao used the dizzying secret sword art. "Am I dashing?" "Young Master Song, look at how dashing I am." The light saber wildly danced in his hands. Suddenly, a pale grey puppet shot toward them. "My striker character is dashing, alright." Song Qingfeng kicked viciously. Then, he took out a brick and aimed it toward the stone puppet. FCK off, snap. The figure who had been waving the light saber instantly dropped to the ground. "Your aim is trash." In the past, the male fighters on the Arad continent had not been strong since martial god Shannon Maya never accepted male disciples. As time went by, female fighters had become the mainstream on the Arad continent. Without opportunities to learn fighting skills, the male fighters didn't give up. Instead, they had gradually created many new styles. It was why the male fighters and female fighters could be treated as totally different classes in Dungeon Fighter Online. In the world where Fang Chi lived in right now, these two classes could be viewed as two factions. They were both fighters sharing some basic knowledge, but they were different in many core areas. For example, female fighters mainly fought with fists. In contrast, Song Qingfeng had been using kicks all this time. Except for the fist techniques that he had learned in the real world, he almost never punched out with his fists. Ugh. It's not enough to only fight with my legs. Song Qingfeng looked embarrassed. Most players were now leveling up clumsily with their skills that were new and unfamiliar. Their enthusiasm drew the attention of many other players, and these people decided to try this new game as well. The whole internet cafe looked livelier than usual. Having played 3 characters in one day, Mr. Fang was extremely tired. When midnight came, he had just used up the fatigue points of the 3rd character. Lounging in his computer chair, he saw that most of the customers had gone, and he stretched his body by force. He hadn't had this feeling in a long time. Looking at his accounts, Fang Chi shook his head and chuckled. On the morning of the next day, many people had gotten up early as if they were driven by some force in their minds. Most of them had reached level 20 yesterday and had learned some complicated and fancy skills of their subclasses, such as the secret sword art. However, these were not enough for them. It was just the beginning. Chapter 525, Black Diamond Membership. It is worth having. The ocean waves along the shore of Heavenly Abyss Sea were usually turbulent, but they looked calmer today. Did you get any new information? Have you found out about the background of this shop? On the broken cliff on the shore of Heavenly Abyss Sea, gloomy black essence condensed into a ghost-like shadow. Nothing new. That shop is really weird. The large figure concealed in a wide, black cloak said in a scratchy and deep voice, "Is it possible that the powerful existence in that era is hiding somewhere in this world?" "No." The voice from the floating black shadow in the sky said, "You know it better than I do. It is impossible." The 2 black figures fell silent as if they were deep in thought. After a long pause, the black figure standing on the cliff asked, "By the way, where are you in the Legend of the Sword and Fairy 3? "I passed the game a couple of days ago," the voice from the ghost-like figure said with some pride. "Even the Demon Lord lost under my sword. HMPH. He lost to Jingtan." The big figure standing on the cliff said with a muffled voice, "Actually, I'm about to pass the game soon as well. It will be a hearty battle to fight with the Demon Lord who could sweep across 6 realms. Right? Did you play the new game called Dungeon Fighter Online in the shop?" The floating shadow in the sky said, "After I passed the Legend of the Sword and Fairy, I found that many people talked about this game. I tried it and found a vast world inside. Maybe there are many things that are beneficial to us." "Of course." The figure on the broken cliff said smugly, "I used up all the fatigue points of my 2 accounts yesterday, and both are at level 20. "What subclass did you advance into?" "I advanced into an Avenger and a Blood Mage yesterday. I checked out their spiritual spells. They seem powerful." "I advanced to a Mistress." The voice from the shadow in the sky floated over. "This subclass is fitting to my identity. I reached level 21, 1 level higher than you." "What? How come you're 1 level higher than me?" The black figure on the cliff asked in a grave voice. "You can only have 156 fatigue points. How did you reach level 21? "I know something you don't." The shadow in the sky looked vague, and the voice sounded smug. "I happened to find a Black Diamond membership on QQ. I read the instruction and bought this membership, which increased my fatigue points to 188 and my experience points gained in the dungeon by an additional 5%. TL note, in actual QQ, users could pay to get all kinds of memberships such as Green Diamond for music and Black Diamond for games. What a loss." The black figure lamented in regret. "I put all my attention on finding out more about the shop's background and didn't see this. Today, I'll buy this. Black Diamond membership. I've got to go now. I must go and buy the Black Diamond membership now." "Should we go to different shops to investigate or?" "Today, let's go to the same shop. We've found out whatever we can. As for the information that we don't know, I don't think we can get it in a short time anyway." "Well, you're right." The figure of black mist said, "Let's go to the shop today and try to get above level 30. With that said, the black mist evaporated, and the 2 figures vanished. Today, all 3 shops, Jia City Shop, Half City Shop, and Yuan Yang City Shop, were crammed with more people than yesterday. "Boss, here's your breakfast." Li Xin pointed at the food box on the counter. I bought you the 9-pattern tiger bone soup which can toughen your meridians and bones and steady your vital essence. It's a special soup for warriors to toughen their physical bodies. Yawn. Mr. Fang yawned, still tired due to yesterday's long playing session. Thanks. I'll get it later. Then, he logged into the game. His Blade Master account was close to level 22. And so were his Launcher account and Ghostbender account. Since this game was generally more difficult than the others, and the players must pass Expert difficulty level and Master difficulty level before playing in the King difficulty level, Fang Chi's progress wasn't much faster than the others. Where's your sister, Lan Yuo, and Xiaoyu? Fang Chi asked Li Xin. Are they in school now? Yeah, Li Xin said. It's said that the cultivators and the warriors from the Jua City shop and the Half City shop are returning today, but some people who have a lot of free time will stay for a bit longer. And Cheng was one of the people who had lots of free time on hand. He had stayed in the shop playing games all day and seldom came out. For the time being, he had no intention of going back to the deserted sea realm. Today, he came to the shop quite early as well. He glanced at other players and found that many of them had come early in the morning to play Dungeon Fighter Online. When An Sheng walked along the corridor, he seemed to see something that flashed before his eyes. Luxioxian? Behind the wide computer chair, he spotted this ID and saw a little image on the screen. She was fighting goblins clumsily with her newly learned magic spells. Lu. An Sheng froze. Isn't she? He suddenly remembered the favor that a few elite soldiers in the Jua army asked of him. An Sheng, the young castellan of Jua City, said in surprise. She's indeed a cute little girl. She also plays the Legend of Mia too? While shaking his head, he walked up with a chuckle, intending to greet her. Then, a naively charming deer head stuck out from the wide computer chair. An Sheng's face twitched. What is this, brother An? What's wrong? Buche, a young master in Jua City and one of An Sheng's buddies, had just walked into the shop. Nothing. I saw a cute little girl, An Sheng said with a nod. Yeah, that's all. He paid 3 minutes of silent condolences to those soldiers of Jua. At this moment, An Sheng saw 2 black figures walking furtively to a remote corner in the shop. How come these 2 people look so weird? An Sheng frowned. Hurry, where can I buy black diamond? Today, I'll have 188 fatigue points too. A voice came from the corner. Hush. Don't let others hear you. 188 fatigue points? An Sheng heard these words. Wait, we can have 188 fatigue points? If one had 32 extra fatigue points, they would have 1 to 2 levels of experience points more compared to others. Immediately, he asked Buche beside him, do you know what black diamond is? Black diamond? Buche looked bewildered. Those 2 people mentioned something about black diamond membership that has 188 fatigue points. Let's go and find it. Black diamond membership? Saya had just walked in the shop and heard this sentence. After all, these people had profound cultivation strengths which gave them acute hearing. What black diamond membership? Before Liu Bieling could react, Saya exclaimed, I seem to have seen such a thing before. We can get a black diamond gift bag with this membership. Black diamond membership, black diamond gift bag. All the cultivators and warriors who were walking into the shop heard her exclamation. An Sheng turned around and looked at the internet cafe which had gone mad like a hornet's net that got poked. FCK Chapter 526 Weapons that emit lights. The black diamond membership is quite cheap. The people of Ultimate West Realm got online, and Liu Bieling glanced at the price and said, 15 crystals. He still had more than 700 crystals in his membership card. He bought it without hesitation. As for the woman who had 2 million crystals, she bought it instantly. Then, she browsed the outfits. You're looking at outfits again? Liu Bieling was puzzled. Don't you have a new outfit? I can't wear the same thing every day. Saya browsed the clothes in the shop and said, Today, I must change into a new outfit. Saya got busy moving clothes from the shop to her shopping cart. There were only about 10 outfits for female slayers. When Liu Bieling glanced at her screen again, he found that the shop had almost been emptied out. At this moment, most of the players only had blue uncommon equipment, and light sabers were in such a high demand that many blade masters and vagabonds, a subclass of female slayers, only had dimly glowing swords, which were level 18 white common weapons. If one could get a drop of blue light saber in the dungeons, it would be regarded as a treasure to them. This delicate and exquisite creation process was totally different from the cultivator's own artifact-making methods, and it naturally attracted the attention of many warriors. The light sabers' bodies were as thin as cicadas' wings, and some of them looked like a beam of light when held in hand. It looked as if the swords weren't solid, but the users could use them to block attacks. However, the blades of the light saber were so radiant that they seemed to be made up of strange light beams. How was this sword made? Jun Yangzai was holding a light saber in his hand. Even the ordinary light sabers were enough to baffle this grand cultivator of Thui Taoist alliance who excelled in spiritual artifact forging methods of various systems. He didn't even know how to find its structure, let alone research deeper into the subject. What a wondrous creation! Duan exclaimed in appreciation while he studied the sword, which seemed to be made of light except for the handle. For other players, they focused on the gameplay. However, these curious artifact masters were eager to find out the mystery of how the sword was made. While the artifact masters were discussing the creation process of these wondrous items, adventurer teams such as the one led by Nalan Hongwu had killed their way into the Castellan's chamber. These players were drawn into the game by the novel skills, exquisite sword techniques, combat techniques, and wondrous spiritual spells. During their adventures, they grew and improved. In a corner of the internet cafe, 2 black figures were each controlling a priest. They had both chosen to the class of priest. It was hard to say if it was because this class featured spells and close-range combat, or it was because of something else. Furthermore, without prior agreement, they had both chosen to be dark shadows under the sun. Avenger was such a subclass for male priests. Slurping sounds came from the black figure that was taller. Wow! I've never tasted such a delicacy in many years. While shaking his head, he gulped down a big mouthful of soup with slurping sounds. The figure beside him had a dark expression. Finally, she couldn't remain seated anymore. I'll go and buy a bowl of instant noodles. Okay. While he ate instant noodles, he asked the female trainer about the background and origin of his subclass. When the female trainer was idle, she kept mumbling, "Brother Nilvas, I will find you." As if she was possessed. After all, it was puzzling that out of priest, there was such a subclass which could unleash demonic power without restraint. Are you listening to a story? The other figure walked back with instant noodles and asked curiously. Kind of. The first figure answered with a muffled voice while eating instant noodles. This subclass is good, and I like it. I must study it in depth. I'm trying to figure out a way to perfectly use the skill points. He sounded very earnest. Different from the paladins in Diablo 2, the priests originated from the resistance of imposters. This world was fraught with all kinds of weird forces, such as the force in the ghost-like hand of male slayers and the metastasis in female slayers. These forces were dangerous and extremely powerful. Besides these forces, there was a force named Blood Curse concealed in this land. The victims of Blood Curse looked like humans but had souls craving for blood, which was why they were called imposters. They would eventually grow into horrid demons who would destroy humans. The priests were born to fight them. Priests had holy thoughts and strong wills, but it didn't mean that they couldn't be eroded by the blood curse. In the past, many people had thought that the transformation to imposter by the blood curse couldn't be reversed. Once corrupted, the victims would sooner or later turn into demons. In the long battles with imposters, Some priests who retained a trace of pureness in their hearts were not completely eroded by the demonic power and didn't turn into devils. Although their minds were tortured by demons, they had faith inside their hearts. With their powerful wills, they resisted the demons' efforts to pull them down into hell. As time went by, these priests turned very vicious inside. They could use the demonic power, but one day, they might not be able to resist the erosion of this force and would turn into true demons themselves. However, so long as they retained a trace of logic, the Avengers were determined to destroy the demons even at the price of falling into a bottomless hell. Excellent. With such great determination, they do deserve to be called Avengers. The figure took another mouthful of instant noodles while mumbling, "But I just feel like this subclass's damage is too low. Is it my illusion?" Meanwhile, not far from him, some people of the Ultimate West realm were talking among themselves. How come this subclass has such great damage? Instant kill. Another instant kill. Instant kill. A black figure who was eating instant noodles paused his chopsticks. After all, it usually took him a long time to kill a monster. Someone can instantly kill monsters? He glanced over and saw a sword master, which was a subclass for female slayers, holding a huge sword which emitted light. It wasn't a lightsaber, but it could also emit light. The black figure put down the instant noodles and wondered, "What treasure is this?" Chapter 527. Although I don't understand it, it looks great. A few people of the Ultimate West realm were fighting in the dungeon known as the Castellan's Chamber when they felt something dark coming from behind. The few people of the Ultimate West realm who were watching from the back also moved aside involuntarily. "Can I ask why this weapon of yours emits light?" On the screen, the sword master's huge sword sparkled with strange chilly light, and everyone could see that it was a treasure. "Does the sword have a rays engraved on them? How come it's so powerful?" "This is a purple great sword that Messiah got with a month of the Black Diamond membership." Seeing that the black-robed figure had no ill intentions toward them, a man of the Ultimate West realm explained smugly, "After 8 reinforcements, it's certainly more powerful than ordinary swords." Reinforcements? After entering this shop, this black figure had heard many new terms such as games, internet, and black diamond, etc. Now, they were talking about reinforcements. What is this new stuff? He was about to ask more questions when that man of the Ultimate West realm said impatiently, "You can study it by yourself. Stop bothering us with questions." His face darkened. That person of the Ultimate West realm shivered involuntarily as if he were stared by a primeval fierce beast. Seeing the figure in black walking away, he murmured to himself, "What happened? How come I feel chills inside? What is it?" The other figure asked in a low voice. "I found out something about it. It's a method named reinforcement which can strengthen these weapons." Reinforcement? The figure hidden in the wide black robe nodded and said in a deep voice, "Right. I think it might be something like adding arrays or engraving runes when we make artifacts." Then, he added, "That little guy didn't want to elaborate, but it doesn't matter. I believe people with this skill are not unknown on the Arad continent. Maybe he is a higher-level artifact master. I'll go and ask my trainer, she might have heard of such people." At this moment, the masters of families such as Tang, Wang, and Xi were walking into the shop with one more person. There was a beautiful woman looking to be in her 30s, while wearing a white robe with black patterns. She had her yellow hair pulled up in the bun behind her head. In the ancient times, people used the term yellow hair to describe old people's hair turning from white to yellow, which was a sign of longevity. With her yellow hair, she looked like an immortal. She was followed by a group of young female disciples wearing white robes with black patterns. Each of them was a beauty with snow-white skin, attracting the attention of the customers in the shop. "Wow! Who are they?" "They are all so beautiful." Lin Xiao, who came to the counter to buy coke, kept glancing at them. "They are from the Kinkiu family of the Hidden Cloud Celestial Realm in Phoenix Resting Mountain." Tang Yu, who came with him to buy coke, whispered to him, "I'm surprised that they are here." "Is this family very special?" Lin Xiao asked curiously. "Isn't it one of your 7 ancient families?" Tang Yu explained in a low voice, even though the people outside are not aware of it. People from our 7 ancient families know there's a ranking list among us. The Kinkiu family and Xuanhuan family have much longer histories than the other 5 families. For example, Hidden Cloud Celestial Realm, where Kinkiu family lives, is an intact small world that was discovered in ancient times. Indeed, so wondrous. Lin Xiao clicked his tongue in surprise. After all, small worlds, even the worn-out ones, only existed in legends. Subconsciously, he glanced at them again and saw cold gazes that were as sharp as swords shooting toward him. So fierce. Lin Xiao cringed. Let's get coke. Let's buy coke. At this moment, the middle-aged woman said, I heard that the elder of my family had been rescued by the owner of this shop in the incident with the Nangong family. Due to the affairs in my family, I haven't been able to come and express my gratitude until now. She sized up the interior of the shop and said, I'm surprised that a grandmaster resides in Yuanyang City as a hermit. Where's the shop owner? He. Here comes a group of yellow-haired little girls. At this moment, the godly swords hanging on the bamboo stick said, Big brother, I wonder if this little girl has poor eyesight. The shop owner is sitting just before her, and she doesn't see him. I agree, she's not as knowledgeable as us, another sword said in a muffled voice. The 2 godly swords talked to each other. The middle-aged woman's face darkened, displeased that she, a woman with great age, was called a yellow-haired little girl. What kind of a dress is this? Then, she glanced at the 2 swords hanging on the bamboo stick. Both swords condensed arms from murderous spirit, and one of them crossed its arms before its chest while the other put its arms on its waist. It looked like they were watching a show. Of course, if they were not hung by rough ropes, they would have looked wondrous. The middle-aged woman from the Kinkiu family asked, Who are these things hung on the stick? They are the holy ancestors of the Nangong family, the Tang family master whispered to her. The middle-aged woman's lips twitched, and she almost laughed out loud. Ahem. To retain her image, she covered it with a cough. They said that the shop owner is here? Yes. The Wang family master pointed at a computer near the counter. There he is. Mr. Fang was busy leveling up in a dungeon, and the boss before him had lost half of its HP. With his attention focused on the battle, Fang Chi didn't notice the newcomers. The Wang family master stroked his beard and said, The shop owner is fighting the boss. We can wait here for a moment. Nonplussed, the people of the Kinkiu family had no choice but stand behind him to watch. On Mr. Fang's screen, a tall, white-haired tall man wearing a purple high-collared coat was fighting a monster made of armor with some strange weapons. The monster waved its sword, and lightning bolts crashed down. Also, many armored knights guarded it closely. The character on the screen had a thick cannon barrel in his hand. With blue flashes, a cannonball that was as big as a fist shot into the monster's armor like a lightning bolt. Then, he slid into the group of monsters with a sliding tackle. Who's this guy? How can he dash into the group of enemies like this? With so many knights surrounding him, this young man with the strange spiritual artifact will be killed if each knight slashes at him, right? While the boss knight waved his sword, the fist-sized cannonball suddenly exploded, forcing the surrounding knights to fall back. The knights closer to the cannonball were knocked down to the ground. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang stood up and smoothly pulled out a huge machine gun which spat out fire dragons, sending the boss knight flying into the high sky. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang got out of the circle with another sliding tackle and landed right before the boss armored knight fell to the ground. He stood up and threw a grenade at the landing position before the guards got close. Calmly, Mr. Fang bumped his knee on the Gatling gun, and the powerful recoil sent him to the distance. This was the skill named BBQ. Then, he broke out of the siege with a sliding tackle, leaving the knights behind him in the dust. Finally, when the knights were about to catch up with him, Mr. Fang revealed a huge gun that he didn't take out before. A wave of radiant laser beams shot across the whole screen. It was the laser rifle. The slow motion during the kill of the boss captured this dazzling moment. The newcomers who had been ready to greet him watched the scene with wide eyes. They didn't understand it but thought it was indeed powerful. Chapter 528, Reinforcement make you poor for 3 generations. I found it. Like GSD who had his own Slayer venue and Pungajin who had his dojo, Erie had her own residence and workshop. Like the Gunners, Siri also came from Empyrean. One piece of technology from the extremely advanced Empyrean brought great transformations for almost all adventurers of Arad, the reinforcer from Empyrean. The machine probably used advanced technology to refine equipment again and make them sharper. Or, perhaps it used the combination of technology and magic to reprocess equipment items with the powerful and mysterious Empyrean system. Either way, the machine could do wonders. After the reinforcement process of the machine, even an old, rusty weapon could be turned into a sharp blade that could kill without being stained by blood. In a corner of the shop look, this is the place. On the screen, a tall, black-clothed male priest walked into the workshop with a female priest who wore black priest clothes and carried a huge sickle. The most eye-catching thing in the workshop was a huge strangely shaped machine. When it worked, pale green magic light flowed inside, and one could even see liquid-like magic energy moving through the transparent tubes. This is the place. Hello, I'm Erie. The person operating the machine was a straightforward woman who was about 25 years old. With her hair pulled up casually to the back of her head, she wore a long blue robe with white edges. The Avenger wearing a big black cloak looked impatient since he didn't care about what her name was. Of course, he didn't know that this name would be imprinted deeply in his mind. It could be that this name would be engraved on his bones. I want to reinforce this weapon. What should I do? The Avenger asked. It's simple. The woman showed him how to operate the machine with a kind heart. The reinforcer was easy to operate. The players only had to put the equipment that needed reinforcing into the reaction chamber, and the machine would do the rest automatically. It's actually so convenient. In a corner of the shop, a figure engulfed by a black cloak sounded astonished. This game is full of pleasant surprises. He took out an elegantly shaped big sickle from his back and put it into the machine. This level 25 sickle cost me many gold coins when I bought it from that merchant, and it hasn't seen blood yet. I wonder how far it can be reinforced. At this stage, the players had rarely encountered purple items and couldn't buy them even if they had money. Right now, they could only use blue weapons. Remembering the scene where the sword master instantly killed many monsters, he rubbed his hands with anticipation. With the aid of this method, I'll certainly reach level 30 today. That little girl only reinforced her weapon 8 times and achieved such a great performance. The mistress beside him said, "We'll reinforce it 18 times. Good idea." He reinforced it once again eagerly. Soon, the machine spat out the sickle, and they saw a faint layer of light emit from the weapon. From the looks of it, the sickle has greater power than before. The uncle-like Avenger chuckled. Let's do it a few more times. With that said, he paid gold coins swiftly and put the weapon into the machine again, pressing their start button. They heard the rumbling noises of the machine while it operated. The second reinforcement was successful. The third reinforcement was successful. The fourth, the fifth, the sixth. Looking at the sickle which had turned from dim to radiant with mystical magic light, they clicked their tongues with wonder. Indeed, he exclaimed, the weapon got more than just sharper. I feel like the magic power in my body increases when I use this weapon. Excellent. Holding her sickle, the mistress said in a low voice, then, I'll have a try as well. Again. Fortunately, I've brought many golden coins with me. Otherwise, there wouldn't be enough. After paying more golden coins, he began the seventh reinforcement. The seventh reinforcement was successful. Again. He watched the sickle in his hand emit a series of strange and radiant magic light. The eighth reinforcement was successful. On the game interface, the properties of this sickle got better, and its power grew with each reinforcement. The Avenger chuckled and said, this is a good thing. I wonder if this machine can reinforce spiritual artifacts. It's said that this machine came from the city above the sky. The other said, this little girl doesn't look like an immortal. But this thing called reinforcer is amazing. Again. He touched his pocket. Ugh. I saved a lot of golden coins. How come I've used them up already? Nonplussed, he said, loan me some coins so that I can finish the last reinforce. The number 9 is the extreme among single digits. The female priest said, it reflects our status. I'll let you finish the reinforce first. The uncle-like black figure dug out all the coins from his pocket and borrowed some from the mistress. After paying, he put the sickle that was sparkling with radiant magic light into the machine again. Hearing the rumbling sounds in the machine, he waited expectantly. This machine is amazing, he lamented. We can put anything in it, and it makes no mistakes. The moment he said it, a shattering sound came from the reaction chamber. Crack. Then, the reinforcer spat out a few colorless small crystals and some black fragments. Exclamation mark. The two stared at the machine dazedly, and the black cloaks concealed their expressions. After a long pause, a voice sounded. Destroyed? To get the level 9 reinforcement, I had put in all my money, and you give me this? What? What does it mean? Pointing at the reinforcer, he demanded in a loud voice. The girl named Geary walked over and glanced at it. Ouch. It seems that the reinforcer ran into issues. Your item was shattered. She forced a laugh. After all, it received some damage when I took it from the Empyrean, and occasional mistakes do happen. Ha 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 ha. In the next instant, huge cracking sounds came from the house. Furious grab, shadow render. No one can dodge my bullets. Then two screams sounded. Soon, two players appeared outside the door of Erie's shop with dark expressions, shouting, we are buying gold coins and purple sickles. Level 5 reinforcement. Level 6 reinforcement. Level 7 reinforcement. The reinforcement failed. A prompt on the game interface showed, the reinforcement effect on your weapon is reset! Exclamation mark. They exchanged a look of bafflement. Outside Erie's shop, they yelled, we are buying gold coins. Level 6 reinforcement. Level 7 reinforcement. Level 8 reinforcement. The reinforcement failed. Outside Erie's shop, the two squatted on the ground and yelled listlessly, we are buying gold coins. Trading black diamond membership for gold coins. They glanced at the time. No, it's noon now. They had come into the shop early in the morning, and now it was noon, which meant that they would have to get offline in about 2 hours. I haven't finished using my fatigue points yet. Chapter 529. A story about esports. Tang Family Master, you mean that the spiritual artifacts in this shop lead to a small world which is half fake and half real? Having just arrived, the people of the Kinky-U family obviously were ignorant of many things in the shop as new players. They spent most of the morning getting to know the stuff in the shop. They had heard much about the shop, but it was totally different to come here and experience it in person. For example, the luxuriously dressed, middle-aged woman, the Kinky-U family master, had created a female gunner character and begun her adventures on Arad. The other girls of the Kinky-U family didn't idle around and had also tried the game, submerged in the wonders of Arad and all kinds of strange spiritual spells and artifacts. Why did the Kinky-U family master choose female gunner? She had seen Mr. Fang use the special spiritual artifact which could shoot out laser beams. According to the Tang family master, this artifact was still a low-level one. Having entered the shop for only 2 days, they could get to use such powerful spiritual artifacts and play exciting games such as The Legend of the Sword and Fairy. They had high hopes for their future adventures in the Dungeon Fighter Online. By now, they had used up their fatigue points. The masters of the ancient families sat on the couches in the lounge area with instant noodles on the tea table before them. Mr. Fang had treated them to instant noodles and even added a sausage in each bowl, which was quite generous of him. A large group of disciples of the Kinky-U family stood behind them respectfully. Of course, the Tang family master said, I've studied this kind of spiritual artifacts. They come from a new spiritual artifact system, and the weapon that you mentioned is called a laser rifle. He sounded excited, This weapon attacks by shooting light beams which have great power and speed. We've studied this type of spiritual artifacts for some time now and found that their structures can revolutionize our spiritual artifact system. The weapons that he had studied for a long time didn't come from Dungeon Fighter Online but from StarCraft, which had been released earlier. However, they could only make use of the machines shown in StarCraft. They still had a long way to go before they could benefit from their research. The noble lady of the Kinkiu family said, "Tang family master, I just used these spiritual artifacts, and it seems to me that they are not easy to research and study. In the virtual reality world, I had neither spiritual artifacts nor my own spiritual essence. All I could do was learn how to use them. I'm afraid that it would be difficult to research and study them. Although the launchers in the game were experts of heavy guns, they only knew how to use and improve them. They didn't have the abilities to design and create guns." The Xun family master shook his head and chuckled on the side. "Taoist brother Tang has found a way." "Oh?" The Kinkiu family master said, "I'm all ears." "I'll show you." The Tang family master found a seat, got online, and entered his character selection interface. On the screen was a tall and lean man from Empyrean. While wearing a purple windbreaker, he had pushed his goggles up above his forehead. This is the name of the subclass at the bottom of the screen was Mechanic. The moment I saw the robot that I created move, I felt as if my child was born. These were the words of a mechanic. Mechanic was a subclass of gunner, and they come from Empyrean that had advanced technologies. Eaton Industrial Zone hosted various power plants, lots of large-scale factories and industry infrastructures. Mechanics were the main force operating the economy in the Empyrean. Since they hadn't entered the war, they gave people the impression that they were non-combative people. However, in the battle in Yellow Road, their robots were only next to a launcher's cannons and a ranger's shooting skills. After that battle, mechanics had been recognized as a battle subclass. The famous mechanics could not only make robots but repair machines as well. Some of them were experts of guns, and other gunners would give them their weapons for maintenance. According to a legend, 3 mechanics could work together and make a giant robot. In fact, mechanics made and modified most of the machinery that their skills required, which meant that they knew lots of knowledge about machinery. The Tang family master told them all the information about mechanics. In fact, this isn't something confidential. Since this subclass offers more knowledge on machinery than others, almost half of the people of our Tang family have advanced into this subclass. The Kinkiu family master said in surprise, "If so, then the spiritual artifacts such as laser rifles and anti-tank guns will be." The Tang family master chuckled and said, "It's not so easy. Right now, we're still learning the basic stuff from the cultivators of the UI Taoist Alliance. How much we can learn depends on our own abilities." "It's so amazing." "How about the other subclasses?" "The subclasses in the game are very complicated." While they were talking about the advantages and disadvantages of different subclasses, most of the players had used up their fatigue points. However, it didn't mean that they had nothing to do. Some players who liked battling had found a new place to play, Pengchin's dojo. Fighting in the dojo to practice their spiritual spells and combat techniques didn't consume fatigue points. Besides, some small missions in the dojo could increase their skill points and bring them some extra experience points. At this moment, the people of the Ultimate West Realm were cheering for Sayo as they watched behind her. Meanwhile, Mr. Fang, who didn't care to join the low-level discussion among the family masters, found that he was surrounded by some people. Lan Yan asked, "You promised to tell us the story of the king's avatar." Bei I and Mu King were among the crowd. Mu King said in disapproval, "Sir, didn't you promise that you'll tell the story when you have time? Can't you tell us something about the vanishing step?" With his acute hearing, Gatinian heard these girls' request and immediately sat down in a nearby seat, thinking that this story might contain some information about this shop's background. Of course, this was his wishful thinking. In a corner of the shop, 2 figures got offline ashen-faced. All their weapons had been shattered, and they didn't even have weapons to battle in dungeons to level up. It forced them to buy 2 low-level weapons from the shop to level up, making the process extremely painful. At this moment, they suddenly paused. The shop owner is going to talk about the king's avatar. Is it something to do with the information that we need? They exchanged a look and found another corner to sit down. Let's listen to the story. This time, Mr. Fang began with a new line. This is a story about esports. Then, he began telling them his own version of the king's avatar, which was drastically altered. Chapter 530. Maybe he's a little noob. Since Mr. Fang had told the part of the story involving vanishing steps to the cultivators and warriors in the Jua City shop, the people of the spiritual state and deserted sea realm who hadn't heard of it had to hear the previous chapters from those who had listened in Jua City. Naturally, Fang Chi couldn't tell the story word by word and explain the theories of techniques as he had done before. Of course, since they were all stuff recreated by the system, and the two games were similar, Fang Chi could explain the techniques better with the help of Dungeon Fighter Online. Mr. Fang continued the story. He told them the part about dual linking ghost boundaries and finished with the screen cannon tactic used in the battle against Jiang Yu. The ghost boundary was similar to drawing a prison on the ground and keeping enemies inside. However, who would be so dumb as to stand in the boundaries during a battle? It needed high awareness and cooperation. If the opponents were all masters, it would be exponentially difficult to get them into the boundary. When the audience heard that two classes with the skill of ghost boundaries can cooperate seamlessly and put their enemies in their ghost boundaries all the time, they were awed by its power. Sir, the Grand Master named Yixu is really so powerful? Even with the restrictions on his level, he can still perform to perfection. They stumbled over these new terms. Perform to perfection? How come that owner of an internet cafe is so lame that he can't recognize a Grand Master? After all, he owns an internet cafe. After all, in the eyes of the people in this world, the people who could open an internet cafe were as powerful as masters who were living the hermit lifestyle. While Mr. Fang was bombarded by questions from the people around him, exclamations came from the people of the Ultimate West realm. On the screen, Saya stood in the dojo with the purple great sword sparkling with magic light in her hand. This sword had been reinforced 8 times. This room in Punk Jin's dojo was set in the same mode as a dungeon. The only difference was that the players didn't fight with monsters but with each other. Also, the dojo had a balance mechanism. The attributes of the players would be adjusted to relatively closer levels. Of course, the adjustment wouldn't eliminate a large gap in equipment and levels. The players with better equipment and higher levels still had advantages, but the advantages weren't as big as before. Despite the fact that the gap between strength shortened, some people were not greatly affected. Saya was one of them. Right now, wearing a fashionable outfit, she had several reinforced purple tier equipment, and her weapon had been reinforced to level 8. Her level was now close to level 30, which was one of the highest in the shop. At this stage, with almost all players still equipped with white and blue equipment, her items far surpassed those of ordinary players. This was a gap that even the balance mechanism couldn't shorten. Inside the dojo was a huge platform. Her opponent was a male fighter. The male fighter had reached level 27, but he was completely suppressed by Saya. By now, she had inflicted quite a few wounds on him. Ha! With a yell, Saya slashed out her great sword and shot out a series of sharp sword energies. While her opponent was busy dodging, she charged forward with a lowered center of gravity like a leopard lunging at its prey. Swift sword. Her whole body shot out and left a series of blurry shadows, and the great sword in her hand turned into a sword light after image. As mentioned before, the sword techniques of sword masters emphasized explosive damage. After the first awakening, the sword masters were called noblesse who were renowned for their sword techniques. The swift sword was one of these techniques. A fragment of a shadow shot past with unimaginable, great speed. When she put away her sword, the fighter flew backward with dented armor as if he were struck with a huge impact force. When the fighter flew toward her, the sword that Saya put away suddenly struck out again. Flash, flash. This skill condensed force and could instantly shoot 3 giant spirit swords forward. Although it needed a very short moment to cast, the damage contained in this strike was overwhelming once it was used. The huge spirit swords shot through the fighter almost in the blink of an eye. With a scream, the fighter vanished, leaving behind only his military uniform and boots. With her long black hair fluttering in the wind, one could change the hair color and style in the shop. The swordmaster held her great sword and stood proudly at the center of the screen. The victory symbol already popped up on the screen. So powerful, her opponent wasn't even able to fight back. A few people of the Ultimate West realm exclaimed, with such equipment and powerful sword techniques, she's unstoppable. On the screen, the swordmaster smiled. Having won many matches in a row, Sire was a little smug. Sir. The people of Spiritual State had only heard about these techniques and movements from Mr. Fang and hadn't seen them before. While they were enthralled by the story, to their surprise, Mr. Fang ended the story with the excuse that he was too thirsty to continue. An idea dawned on them. Sir, you're tired of talking, right? Maybe it's time to get some exercises. We've never seen you in the dojo before. Why don't you try it now? Tang Yu's eyes lit up. That's a good idea. Should I try it? Mr. Fang scratched his head. Fine, I'll try my hand. Soon, Mr. Fang came to the dojo. At this stage, the dojo offered two options to enter a match. One was a fast start, and the other was entering another player's room manually. Randomly, Mr. Fang clicked into the first room on the first page. In the system version, the players with the most matches and the highest win rate would get placed higher on the list. The win rate of the player in the first room on the first page wouldn't be low. Fang Chi looked closer and said, wow, it is a little noblesse, sister. Swordmasters would awaken as noblesse. On the other side, a group of warriors of the Ultimate West realm saw the prompt on the left upper corner of the screen. The player kill one teamed mate with one bullet has entered the room. Ha 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 ha. Kill one teamed mate with one bullet. What name is this? So funny. Even Sire almost laughed out loud, wondering who would get such a name. Maybe he's a noob? In the game, since there was no mechanism to prevent harming teammates, many new players often made mistakes. Killing teammates on purpose was seldom seen since such behavior would lead to punishment. He doesn't even have a new outfit. He is only wearing the white and blue equipment. Maybe he's indeed a little noob. This name is hilarious. Ha ha ha. This name is so funny. Maybe he is here to tell jokes.